It's that time of year again, folks, the dog days of summer, and time to think about back-to-school shopping. Now save your time, save your money, and save your patience instead of going to Walmart and waiting in one line that's open out of 26 with 7,000 people in line ahead of you. Go to gearnetwork.com/Amazon and click on the back-to-school banner, and it will take you right to your account, and you can shop right there. And what's new this year, if you go there and you enter in your zip code, it's going to bring up the list of schools near your area. You can choose one and the grade that you're shopping for, and it's going to bring up the school list for that grade for that school, so you can cross-reference your school supply needs based on the list that was provided to Amazon. Sweet feature this year, saves you a lot of time. Again, gearnetwork.com/Amazon. Click the back to school link, do your shopping through there. It helps us out, it helps you out, and it definitely does not help Walmart out, but they don't need help anyway. So again, thank you for bookmarking and saving and sharing our links to Amazon through gearnetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
You're listening to Better Live Than Dead.
I believe it's a big challenge for all building to keep things in perspective and to, if we're going to get addicted to anything, let's get addicted to the process.
And with that, we welcome you to another episode of Trust the Podcast, powered by Better Live Than Dead and the Gear Radio Network. This is episode 43, the Augustcast, and as always, you can hear us on BetterLiveThanDead.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you can listen to podcasts, you can listen to this podcast, and if you can't, let me know, we'll make it happen. As always, I'm Ryan Wolfe at WolfeBLTD, joined today by a very special guest, Nate Geary of WGR, who will be with us in just a few short minutes. Just wanted to jump on real quick before and say Better Live Than Dead is now an affiliate of Rise Supplements, a gym supplement brand based right out of Buffalo, New York. Head over to Rise Subs, that's RYSESUPPS.com. Use the code RWOLFE with an E, RWOLFE, 9510 to receive 10% off your order. Or you can also go over to Better Live Than Dead, where we have our Amazon affiliate link and the Rise supplement link as well. That being said, we're going to shoot this one to a quick commercial break. When we come back, as mentioned, Nate Geary of WGR makes his Trust the Podcast debut.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy Perez. Project Transformation is not just about my weight loss, but it's also about the people who are supporting me in my weight loss and your journeys. And frankly, it's not going to be just about my weight loss journey. Throughout this, I want to highlight people in the community that are making changes and transforming the community themselves. So it's not going to be just my transformation, but it's the community's transformation. And I'm inviting you to walk with me, only on the Gear Radio Network.
Hey there, Eric here from IndyCard Media, stopping in to let you know that we are here to help you in your graphic art and design needs. T-shirts, branding, flyers, you name it. Get a hold of us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/IndyCard Media. That's INDY Card Media. Or give us a call at 337-446-4331.
You're listening to Better Live Than Dead on the Gear Radio Network.
And we are back here on Trust the Podcast. Again, you know me. I'm Ryan Wolfe at WolfeBLTD. And as promised, joining me on the IndyCard Media Hotline, recently named as the host of the Bills Radio Network's pregame, halftime, and postgame alongside Joe DiBiase. We have Nate Geary on the podcast today. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm the better, more handsome, more talented version of the duo. So you did good booking me and not Joe DiBiase. So.
Well, I'm glad that we've got the one who pulls the weight, where Joe's just there for, I guess, whatever. He's there
to sign autographs. I'm there to do the hard work.
That's fair. It's like in Major League, where Bob Uecker was doing everything, and then the guy just kind of chimes in every so often. But hey, he's not exactly the best color guy, and not the best color guy in the business for nothing. That's for sure. Now you can follow Nate. You can follow Nate on Twitter at Nate Geary WGR. Very simple, very, very clean cut. I like it. We're here today to talk about the Buffalo Bills. It's Trust the Podcast. Why wouldn't we talk about the Buffalo Bills here on the podcast? So first off, we're deep in the throes of the preseason. It is August 11th at the time of this recording. So football season is close. Fall is close. Winter's close, and we're all going to freeze. So I kind of rolled down that hill real quick. I understand that. I do apologize. I kind of blacked out. I don't know what happened. But the Bills, they're 1-0. They beat the Indianapolis Colts. They're clearly going to head towards a perfect season. There's no other way to look at it. Things were good. It was encouraging, I guess, to say the least, that Thursday night game against the Colts in Buffalo.
Yeah, what do we take from these games? Because, Nathan Peterman, if you remember, into 3 weeks of the preseason, didn't have a football touch the ground. So, as much as you could take away from a preseason game, I think I like where they are defensively. I think what you could take away from that game is that, holy cow, this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, might be really, really good. They were good last year. They might skip really and go to really, really pretty quickly here, depending on, and really what it comes down to is the depth, Ryan. Like when they have a guy out, like they don't have Jerry Hughes playing, they don't have Lorenzo Alexander playing, Micah Hyde playing, and yet they're still able to, on like 6 carries, have 1 yard of rushing for the Indianapolis Colts. That was the impressive thing to me. Is I think they're a team defensively that is maybe right about to peak. I mean, if you start to look at some of the ages of some of their best players, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, they're no longer spring chickens. They're definitely getting closer to 30. And that's something to pay attention to, because the defensive backfield, for the most part, you have the veterans on the back end, and then you have the young guys up front. In the 2 corners, and obviously Levi Wallace, who's still a very young player in his 3rd season, and Tre'Davious White going into his 3rd season as well. And Kevin Johnson is a young guy too. I mean, he's coming off of his rookie contract in Houston, former 1st-round pick. So they've got a lot of depth and youth along the cornerback position, bringing in Captain Munnerlyn today to provide that veteran presence. So yeah, I mean, they're really interesting defensively, and I mean, you can make the argument that maybe they're peaking this year, especially with guys like Jerry Hughes. I didn't even mention, who's on the wrong side of 30. So a lot of veteran players that I think maybe this year is a year they could quote peak.
It's definitely hard too, because like you said, you mentioned Nate Peterman, and we saw him again. He was doing his preseason thing, that 50-yard run for the Oakland Raiders. I forgot where I was going with that one for a second, but yeah, Nathan Peterman. Whenever, again, it's one of those things where you say the name and your body just shuts down. I can't handle it. I don't want to see it. But it's going to be absolutely great when he ends up starting over Derek Carr in the.
And I do want to go on record. He is going to play football games. Just let's just make that clear, because Mike Glennon is in front of him, and Mike Glennon stinks. Definitely in my prime would have just been slightly worse than him. So
I was at a wedding last night, as I had mentioned. For the record, everybody, I was out last night, and it was an open bar, so I was enjoying myself. Okay. And I texted Nate and Joe and said, "Hey guys, do you want to do this podcast?" And Nate said, "Yeah, how's 9:30?" I said, "At night, because I don't know if I'm going to be alive at 9:30 in the morning." So, we were talking last night. I was talking with one of my wife's cousin's husbands, and he was like, "Hey, I think that I could be a better quarterback than Nathan Peterman." And I was like, "You know what, buddy? I mean, my 5-year-old nephew probably could, and he struggles throwing a forward pass. So, I no hate to the guy, but no,
of course,
glad he's not in the roster anymore. It's nice to go into a camp. I mean, Matt Barkley, and we'll talk about Josh Allen shortly, because we have to. But it's nice. It's nice going into camp and going through camp knowing that if something were, God forbid, something were to happen to Josh Allen, you're not automatically chalking up the second string quarterback as a loss.
Yeah, they, fast forward 1 year, they've really done a nice job completely turning over the quarterback room from, basically the start of training camp last year to the start of training camp this year. They're in a really good position. They're in a position that, roughly 25 other teams wish that they were in. Have a young quarterback that you believe in, whether or not other people believe in them, this organization believes in them, and have a really good backup that you feel like, I truthfully, and I say this in terms of backup quarterbacks, Matt Barkley is one of the top 5, 6, backup quarterbacks in football. He's when healthy, and he is now, a definite guy that can come in, play football games for you, and not throw 5 interceptions, which I think is key, and that's what teams are looking for. And whether or not Nathan Peterman gets another opportunity to do that will be interesting. I think he's in a good situation to be in. If you're Nate Peterman, you'd want to be in this situation. But if you're looking from a Bills fan's perspective and on what the Bills have done at the quarterback position, a big change. And I like that they've got a developmental guy in Tyree Jackson too. A guy coming from a local college. Not only that, but I mean, he's big. He's got a big arm. It's nice to have a developmental guy that you look forward to watching third and fourth quarters of preseason games, and it's not Matt Sims anymore.
I agree with that one. Hey, you talk about depth, and that really brings me to it's a nice little transition. It's like you do this for a living or something, brings us to the three big things. Yeah, exactly. You know what you're doing. You know your ways around. The three big things. First off, the injury bug. Now that kind of it's a transition because you talk about depth. The Buffalo Bills have brought in a lot of veteran depth defensively. Clearly, we know who's going to start. There's no secret going into camp that defense was already set. It was pretty much just who's going to be the second, third guy, who's going to play where, whatever. So it's kind of weird that for me at least, as a Bills fan, it's kind of weird to see them start building up positive depth on the offense because normally it wasn't ever really next man up. It was just, well, if he goes down, I guess we're screwed, as we just mentioned with the quarterback room. But the offensive line is kind of in that position right now where if another guy gets hurt, there may be trouble afoot. I mean, right now, Mitch Morse, who is heading into his first year of a 4-year, $44.5 million contract, has missed the bulk of camp in concussion protocol. Now, this is very troublesome because he's had at least 3 documented concussions, but heading into camp, he was a lock to be the starting center, obviously, with that ticket there. But then you look across the line as well. The depth players are now starting to get hurt. You've got Russell Bodine, who we know how good of a center he is. He's not the greatest. He's not the greatest, but he hurt his oblique. Connor McDermott's in concussion protocol as well. So I guess I kind of answered my question here, Nate, but I'll ask you because I want to get your thoughts on it. How important is it especially with what we saw last year with the Buffalo Bills offensive line, how it was kind of all jacked up all over the place, different guys at different times. How important is it for this team, for Josh Allen, for the running back room, and for the offensive line itself to have a solid set of 5 guys who are going to be healthy and who are going to be running together as a unit for most of the season?
I'll give you something that no one has ever been willing to say aloud, and I've got a 2-step process for you right now to their success, right? Step 1, it was completed today. They released Vlad Dukas. So beautiful. Step 1 of the 2-step process is complete. The next step is cut Russell Bodine. Vlad Dukas cut plus Russell Bodine equals benefit. Okay, there you go. There's your 2-step process right now.
Addition by subtraction.
That's exactly right. So they got rid of one. The second one needs to come. But regardless, I think they were sort of a product of circumstance because Mitchell Morse goes down with the injury. Yes, they obviously are relying on him to be a facet in that offense. He's got to be in there for 15, 16 games. Just for the sake of him being worth the investment. They made him the highest paid center in football. Rightfully so. He has the pedigree, the ability to be that player when healthy. And that's the problem. And so far it's not a great sign, but I wouldn't call it something I'm overly worried about. If he misses football games that count, that's when I'll start to have, my ticker will sort of move there. But for right now, until he misses football games, it is what it is. But I think the circumstance that hurt them, that sort of forced their hand in playing a Russell Bodine, is John Feliciano, the guy who's likely the second string center and potentially starting right guard. In an ideal world, he's your fifth or sixth offensive lineman, I should say. And he can play both guard and center. He could be your second string center and second string right guard. You have Wyatt Teller, who can play both right guard and right tackle. You have Spencer Long, who can play center and guard. So right there, 3 guys can play 3 positions, and 2 of them can play 2 positions, right? So you have a ton of versatility in the interior there. So great. Really what you need now is a swing tackle. Adrian Waddell, his injury stinks because I think he was probably primed to be that swing tackle. So that I think in an ideal world right now, the reason that I don't think you can do a Cody Ford and Ty Nsekhe right side of your offensive line is because they don't have the other swing tackle, that depth tackle player that could come in if a Deion Dawkins gets hurt and they have to move on Ty Nsekhe. You don't want to keep moving around your rookie right guard in Cody Ford. And I think they're starting to realize that the best option for them on that right side is Ty Nsekhe and Cody Ford. Sal Capaccio did a great breakdown at WGR550.com about just their effectiveness in the run game and sort of their ability as 2 really big, strong, mean players that play to sort of what they say the quote echo of the whistle. Those 2 players are really intriguing to me on the right side of the offensive line, and it's something they need to figure out how to do it. They make a trade yesterday. They bring this Bates kid in from Philadelphia, went Penn State. He was undrafted free agent, so we'll see whether or not he can fill in this swing tackle role. But it's going to be difficult to play the offensive line you really think are the best five if they don't have another quality depth player at tackle, which I think they lost in Waddell.
And absolutely, I agree with that one. For instance, just looking, I mean, we know going into camp, Ty Nsekhe was likely going to be the guy that took over at right tackle, but were they comfortable pushing Cody Ford to guard? Now what you're seeing is a lot of people saying that, Sal Capaccio himself included, that right guard might be where Cody Ford ends up long term. I mean, it's August of his first camp of his first season. So, we're not putting him in the Hall of Fame yet, but he looked very comfortable at right guard, has continued to look very comfortable at right guard. Ty Nsekhe, we've seen is like you said, very talented. I think before this offseason, very underrated over in Washington. I think if right now the line, for instance, today at practice, from what I gather off Twitter, is it was Deion Dawkins, left tackle, Quentin Spain, left guard. They had John Feliciano and Spencer Long rotating in and out with the ones at center. Cody Ford at right guard, Ty Nsekhe at right tackle. If Mitch Morse is not healthy for the first game of the season, which like you said, Nate, is I agree as well. If he's not healthy, that's not good, obviously, but you don't want to keep switching in and out. So I almost wonder with Mitch Morse is I know he's been ramping it up, in concussion protocol is kind of a difficult nut to crack, because for some players it's very in and out. Other players, especially like a guy like Mitch Morse, as I mentioned, with the 3 documented concussions in Kansas City, it seems as if maybe they'll wrap him in bubble wrap and say, look, we're going to practice you, but we're not going to play it, or something along those lines. Or maybe they'll get him out for the 4th preseason game to just get him comfortable and kind of gelling and rolling. But I don't think we're going to see, if once he's cleared from concussion protocol, I can't imagine we're going to see much of Mitch Morse in-game action, just because I guess my thought process behind it has always been, if you're going to lose a guy to injury, you'd rather lose him during a regular season game and not a preseason game. But then again, you can never predict injuries, obviously. But I think going into the season, if that's the line, fine. I mean, it's a lot better than last year. It's quite an improvement. And honestly, bringing us to our second of the 3 big things here in the podcast, it's going to help out the running backs immensely. I mean, the Bills' backfield, it's great too. The one thing I must mention, Nate, it's really great to go from, I mean, we know the defense is going to be good. They have to be good because they've been built up. They've been tailored to Sean McDermott's defense. It seems like they've got it all figured out. So we expect them to be good. With the offense, it's almost one of those things where a couple years ago when the Bills defense was good and then got bad, and you're like, oh, how do they get back to being real good? Try to find those pieces, and how is this going to work? How's that going to work? Who's going to fit here? Whatever. That's how it feels with the offense this year. You look at the backfield. They've got Devin Singletary, Frank Gore, LaShawn McCoy. They've got TJ Yeldon. They've got Christian Wade as well. They've got a lot of bodies back there. And looking at it too, I mean, they've been giving Devin Singletary a look with the ones, and he's looked like he belongs there. I mean, granted, his numbers weren't great against the Colts, but as you mentioned, one thing that Sal Capaccio points out is that he looks like he belongs with the ones, and that's huge because, I mean, you've got Frank Gore, LaShawn McCoy. I have to think maybe one of those only survives. I'm not sure that both of those guys can coexist on the roster, despite the fact that it would be nice to have both of them because it would be neat. But aside from that, it's hard to think that those guys could coexist. And then you've got TJ Yeldon, who can't get on, who had a fumble against the Colts, and that was it. And he was done for the game. So really, I guess, Nate, the overlapping question here is, where is the backfield going? How do you think this is all going to shake out come week 1?
So I think it was Chris Brown of BuffaloBills.com that said something that I really agree with. And the reason that he thinks LaShawn McCoy, Frank Gore, Devin Singletary, and that 4th running back position, I think before the game, was TJ Yeldon. I think Sonoris Perry is inching his way closer to that 4th running back position for sure. And I'm not sure that Marcus Murphy's totally out of it. But for right now, it's kind of a 5-man race for 4 positions. And I think the first 3 are LaShawn McCoy, Frank Gore, Devin Singletary. And whether or not Devin Singletary of week 1 looks like Devin Singletary of week 15, could be two very different things, right? But I think for right now, what Chris Brown had mentioned that I agreed with is that LaShawn McCoy is sort of like Josh Allen's insurance policy, right? Like what you don't want to do is, take a weapon like LaShawn McCoy, whether or not you think Devin Singletary can be as effective or not, he's still a rookie. And you still have, there is really no, monetary, there's no cap benefit to letting go of LaShawn McCoy. He's his contract expires next season. He's likely not going to be back next year. Why get a guy that definitely can help you? And I still think he can help this football team, especially out of the backfield as a receiver. And they're throwing a ton to their running backs, and especially in training camp, during these practices, during their scrimmages that against each other on the 11-on-11, and then in the preseason, like they're using their running backs, they're using their slot receivers. There's definitely this ideology that they really want to sort of utilize the check down, and that comes from a Cole Beasley aspect, but that also comes from your running back. So having a guy that you can trust to be a 40, 50, 60 reception type guy, and that's LaShawn McCoy, there is no real benefit of just kind of getting rid of him for no reason, and the best you're going to get now for him is a 5th or 6th round pick. So I think you'd rather have LaShawn McCoy for another year.
I don't disagree. I mean, if it's something where he can play up to LaShawn McCoy standards, I mean, we don't know was last year him beginning to drop off, or was last year the lack of an offensive line and a rookie quarterback, which I tend to think that might be the thought process.
I mean, Devin Singletary is really interesting, right?
Absolutely.
Like I think a lot of people were wrongfully negative about his drafting, right? Like I remember a lot of people saying he ran a 4.46 or a 4.66. Like this isn't an NFL running back. And I'm like, and I like Devin Singletary coming out. Chris Trapasso, and equally on the Cody Ford conversation, where Chris Trapasso rated Cody Ford as one of the top guards in the entire draft, but only a mid-level tackle. And I agree. I thought Cody Ford all along should have been at right guard, because he has the ability to be elite at right guard, and he could be really good at right tackle. But I mean, put him in a position where we think he could be elite. And I think similarly with a guy like Devin Singletary, is he has the sort of running ability, like these innate running style. He runs a lot like Le'Veon Bell. People make like LaShawn McCoy references, and he's definitely not as quick, but he's very instinctual as a runner. And when people said 4.66, I'm like, yeah, but you don't really like that of that Holyfield kid, right? Evander Holyfield's son from Georgia, ran like a 4.78 or like a 4.88, and he's I forgot. I saw him in the preseason the other day running away from NFL defenders. And like sometimes 40 times with running backs, they just really aren't what they seem, and they're sort of overused in judging them. So Devin Singletary is a really unique player. He had like 4 catches last season, and people are like, well, he doesn't catch out of the backfield. And one of the things is like, well, he just wasn't asked to. It doesn't mean that he can't come out of the backfield and catch. In college, he just wasn't asked to. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting how it plays out. The good thing is we're having a discussion about which 3 running backs, which of 3 running backs should get the most carries. And I think that's a good problem to have if you have 3 guys that all should be vying for time. And it's kind of where the league is. There aren't very many 3-down workhorse backs in the NFL. So it's a by committee approach, and we'll see how it works out.
You mentioned Elijah Holyfield. We'll see a lot of him this week against the Buffalo Bills. He is a running back for the Carolina Panthers. But speaking,
he was running away from defenders, by the way, at 4.80 or whatever.
It's one of those things where people talk about, oh, hey, he runs a 4 whatever. It's like, okay, how often are NFL players running a straight line?
Hardly ever, right?
Like if you can catch the ball out of the backfield and you can make defenders miss, you're fine. I think my thought process is, especially with how the first week played out. I mean, not having LaShawn McCoy play in the game at all, have Frank Gore start. My thought process might either be that they're keeping him in bubble wrap, or they're waiting for something to force their hand. Either someone else getting hurt in the league, or Devin Singletary comes out and blows it up, or whatever happens, because they're kind of, I mean, you're not going to get a lot for LaShawn McCoy if you trade him. But I guess, if you value your draft picks, I guess a 4th, 5th round pick, whatever, whatever. But looking at it, my thought process behind it is simply keep LaShawn McCoy for now, but if someone forces your hand, you've got Frank Gore that can still play at a high level, I think, at least personally. because looking at it right now too, I did some research, shockingly, for the podcast. And I went over to ESPN and was just looking up their fantasy projections. And next season, they've got LaShawn McCoy at 139 carries, Devin Singletary at 72 carries, Frank Gore at 127 carries, and TJ Yeldon at 25 carries. So they have got a lot going around, a lot going on. It seems, if nothing else, fantasy projections believe that there's going to be sort of a situational thing going on. But then again, hey, if we're only putting Singletary in to throw swing passes to him, they'll obviously catch on to that or whatever it may be. So it may be something where it doesn't benefit them to do that, but clearly there's a lot there that has to be shaken out and figured out. And thankfully there are 3 more weeks of camp to go. Certainly, I know we saw things like in Houston where they cut their running back, Deonta Foreman, because, they weren't happy with, however, like stuff like that will happen. Guys will get hurt, guys will get cut, and maybe someone calls the Bills and says, you know what, we'll take McCoy on for a year because worst case scenario, contract's up, whatever. That's the fun part about this all. But I do want to mention too, speaking of fantasy, we got to talk about our guy, Josh Allen. He's in his second camp. Josh Allen, the man.
Oh, okay.
Got to talk about the man, Josh Allen.
Okay.
Second training camp, going into his second season. This is our third of the 3 big things here on the podcast today. Starting off with fantasy projections. Let's just look at ESPN has him ranked as the 23rd best quarterback next season. But the one thing, Nate, I've been listening to a lot of football podcasts, trying to get myself amped up because for some reason it's always a slow burn getting back into football. A lot of people have been saying Josh Allen could low key be a steal, a surprise, I guess, pick out of the litter this season with quarterbacks who aren't in the top 10. He's projected 3,291 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 100 carries, 569 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, whatever. They've got him projected around 260.8 fantasy points. Now, going back to the real world here, looking at Josh Allen in camp, I mean, he seems to have worked on. We know he can throw the deep ball. We know he could launch it a mile if he wanted to, but it's all about those short intermediate passes that have kind of challenged him. I personally think with the signing of Cole Beasley to kind of give him a security blanket, kind of like what I don't want to, I'm going to say it, but I know someone's going to yell at me for saying it, but kind of like Edelman to Brady, Beasley could be to Allen, where if you don't have a pass downfield, toss it short to a guy who is good in open space and can accelerate and make stuff happen. Instead of needing to bomb it on 3rd and 8, maybe you just drop it down and let him do work, But those are the things that Allen struggled with last year. So what have you seen in camp so far, Nate, and then the short time in the first preseason game about Josh Allen that has you, I guess, a little more excited for his second season?
Well, the fact that he's got guys, right? And I'm talking about Isaiah McKenzie potentially making this team is the team's 6th receiver. Last year he's coming in here mid-season off the street, off someone else's practice squad, and being inserted as basically the team's number 2, number 3 receiver. So that kind of gives you an idea, that player right there is fighting it out just to be the number 6 guy on the roster. So that kind of gives you an idea of where their receiving course kind of gone in the last 6 to 8 months, and I really like the addition of John Brown. I think he's exactly the type of player that they needed to add to this offense, that dynamic, sort of a veteran version of what they hope Robert Foster can be, and hopefully that development comes from the competition and sort of the veteran leadership that you're going to get from a John Brown type player. And obviously Cole Beasley, I think, is one of the more underappreciated players in the NFL. And I think you're going to see that this year. And a lot of people are really high on Dallas. I'm not as much, especially with the whole Ezekiel Elliott thing. But I think that offense losing what Cole Beasley brings and that ability to separate on 3rd down and provide his quarterback that extra yard and a half that other guys can. I mean, he was 5th in the league last year in average yards per cushion. So like he gets 1.83 yards of separation. And that ranked 5th amongst all receivers. So you're talking about one of the best players in all of football at generating separation with his route running. And for a guy like Josh Allen, that's really, really big. And especially if those two can be on the same page. And every indication is they're both very, very – they do a nice job communicating with each other. They're always off to the side talking about body language and where they should be. And there's just this good communication between the both of them. And there was a really interesting quote. Cole Beasley said something like, I'm having the most fun I've ever had playing the game of football here with this group. And when Beasley has a lot to prove because, him and Scott Linehan, their offensive coordinator in Dallas, ended up having a falling out. And you wondered pretty vocally at the beginning of last season, you kind of knew it was the last year that Cole Beasley was going to be in Dallas. But I think he had a really kind of interesting career there. He had 1 year of 75 receptions. And I mean, he can be a player that if you give 100 receptions to, he's going to catch 75% of them. So, or 100 targets too. So, I don't know. He's a really interesting player to me. I think he's maybe their best pickup that not a lot. I mean, it's not that we're not talking about him, but I don't think we're talking about him enough as being one of the focal points where I think a lot of what this offense does is going to run through him in the slot. And that's just a huge weapon for a quarterback who's trying to find his way. And the cool thing about Josh is we don't have to question whether or not Josh understands what he's seeing. One of the big things when he was in that draft process was he was very impressive on the whiteboard and being able to identify defenses, things like that. So from the brains aspect of this and his understanding of what he's seeing, that's a good thing. It's a matter of, can he apply that to game situations and not, play the hero ball and throw into triple coverage across his body while he's running, so he's got to try to avoid those things. If he can, this offense could be really good. I like Cole Beasley a lot as a fantasy player, especially in PPR. Like that's a guy I'm targeting,
Absolutely. I was actually, you mentioned the Dallas Cowboys. The one thing that I've, I know this is a Bills podcast, but I do have to mention this here real quick. I guess I don't understand how everyone has the Cowboys winning the Super Bowl this year, but they're the hot pick, so I'm not going to pick them. Also, it's really rough when you've got a running back threatening to sit out an entire season, and that's the guy you want to personally keep as a keeper in your league. So I'm not complaining about my situation because it's only fantasy and it's not real life, but I am complaining about my situation because it's fantasy and it's real life. And it's real. It's still real to me, damn it.
And that's all that matters.
Exactly. I've got to look at. I won the championship last year. I won
two. I won two of my 3 leagues, so it's my first time ever. I'm really excited about that.
This is the Trust the podcast of champions.
That's exactly right.
That's probably why.
Do we get a banner?
Look at. I'll tell you what.
We put a banner up.
To be, and I know this is kind of a little bit of a tangent here, but just to be an asshole. My brother was upset that I beat him a couple years ago. So I went out and I photoshopped some fake banners and I hung them up in my office, like little just pieces of paper, laminated them, stuck them up on a shelf. Didn't tell him about it. He came over one day and he's like, "This is obnoxious." And I said, "Buddy, I did it for you. I don't care. I did it. I don't care about anything. I didn't do it for me. I did it so I could make you mad, and it was worth it.
It wasn't for selfish reasons.
It's worth every second of it." But speaking of champions, hopefully Josh Allen will end up being. I
like him. I don't know though. I mean, he's kind of at the end of last season. He was like number 1 in fantasy over the last 5 weeks of the season.
He was. If you picked him up at the end of the season and played him in your playoffs, you may have won with Josh Allen as your quarterback because he was that dynamic and that able, just kind of like you mentioned, the hero ball. Is that transitionable over a full season? Probably not, but there will come a time. There will come games where they'll load up. They won't load the box up. Or whatever, maybe they will. I have no idea. I'm just throwing out football words. Whatever they do, he may go, "Hey, guess what? I can't bomb it deep because they've got a great secondary, so I'm just going to run the ball or whatever." Or there'll be a game where he goes nuts and throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Right. But it's the potential there of he can run, he can throw, and he's effective, mostly effective in both assets.
I don't think he should be expected to be running for 100 yards a game like he was towards the end of the season. Like he over 2 straight weeks, he had 200 yards passing and 100 yards rushing. He's the only rookie quarterback to ever do that in NFL history, or something, or a second. So I mean, I just don't think he should be expected to do that. I don't think they want him running for 100 yards a game. I think they want him to use it as a strategic weapon. And for fantasy players, that's good because, any quarterback that you could rely on for 5 to 7 extra points per game running, that you can't get from other people, that's huge in fantasy, and especially a rushing touchdown compared to a passing touchdown. So Josh Allen's definitely a weapon. I would say at the 23rd overall in terms of fantasy quarterbacks, that's probably pretty fair. I hope that's where he ends up statistically, because if he ends up there statistically, then 23rd, that'd be cool.
Hey, look, as long as let me see here, as long as he's not the worst quarterback in the league. I think that's a positive, because we all know the defense is going to be good. As long as the defense can be real good. As long as the defense can be good enough where my thought process, end of the day, is going to be one of those situations where as long as, because Josh Allen it's always one of those things where the defense is good enough where they could probably win you 7, 8, 9 games, whatever. But there will come games where the defense allows 20 points, 20, whatever points. And then Josh Allen has to step it up himself and then make that happen. I think for me, those are the games where, hey, the Bills defense is allowed 10 points. You can go out and score 13. You can go out and score 14, whatever, enough to win. But there will come a day where, as I mentioned, a lot of points, there might be a shootout or something, like maybe Thanksgiving against the Cowboys. The Bills defense struggles to stop Ezekiel Elliott, so Josh Allen has to go out and win the game with his arm. And those are the games that will tell you a lot, because it's, we go back to the hero ball thing. You can do that as much as you want to, but you don't want, that's not a long-term thing. You can't do that. I think really the only guy in NFL history that I can think of who played hero ball all the time and was somewhat successful was Michael Vick. And I don't think, off the top of my head, I know Brett Favre kind of was, but he's more of a gunslinger. He wasn't a hero ball guy. But it seemed like, if Josh Allen is playing hero ball all next year, even if they win, even if the Bills win and it's successful, whatever, it's not successful long term. And I think it almost might be something that's a detriment for his development if he continues to have to do that or continues to do that, because it seems like the Bills are bringing in running backs. They're bringing in a better offensive line. They're bringing in better weapons, both down the field and underneath, to give him all the options he needs. So if he just continues to say, like the Rex Grossman, F it, I'm going deep, but the opposite, F it, I'm just going to run it, that's probably a bad thing to see. So again, we want to see him develop a little more as a quarterback, be a little more accurate, and be able to make the throws that he wasn't able to make last year. Then I'll start to get a little more excited about the Bills' potential this season.
I'm right there with you, man. It's, his development is it's the most important thing to this team's future. And literally, I said it yesterday, what he showed in that first preseason game is like the ability on those intermediate and short throws to be average. And like, that's all he needs to be, just be average. And this team has a defense and running game and an offensive line and skill position players that's good enough to be a playoff team if he's just average. So, be the 23rd, 21st best quarterback statistically in the league. And man, that would do wonders for this team.
Absolutely. I agree with that one. I'm over here looking on ESPN, trying to find out where, I don't know. I'm just clicking on pages right now. This is what we do sometimes. Sometimes we prepare, sometimes we don't. We just make stuff up as we go along here. Okay. So I'm looking here. Yes, they have, your 2019 quarterback projections, Mahomes, obviously, even if Mahomes takes a step back, he's still going to be fantastic. Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Andrew Luck, there's your top 5. But scrolling down the list, they've got like Kyler Murray ranked 13th. That's hard to say. You don't know. They've got Lamar Jackson ranked very high, obviously, because of his running capabilities. But like a guy like Jameis Winston, can Josh Allen be better than Jameis Winston? Quite possibly. Can Josh Allen be better than a guy like Kirk Cousins? Quite possibly. Derek Carr, Sam Darnold, again. Quite possibly. But, the guys that are behind him, you're not surprised to see behind him. Like, they've got Matt Stafford behind Josh Allen. I'm not sure I would buy into that one, but we'll see. But like Marcus Mariota, Andy Dalton, Eli Manning, Nick Foles, Joe
Mariota
Flacco.
Stinks too.
Oh, he's not. Yeah, he
stinks.
He's not great. Not great
he
at
stinks. All. Tannehill's better, I think. I think Tannehill should play there.
He might end up playing there, to be quite honest.
Should.
But looking at the projections, it seems like cautiously optimistic with Josh Allen. It seems like that's what all the professionals have this season, and I'm the same way, and I feel like you are as well. I'm cautiously optimistic about what Josh Allen might do this season. But I want to mention as well, because we're getting to that point in the podcast, we're going to look ahead to, I guess, the rest of the preseason next week, the Buffalo Bills, what they're doing, all that stuff. I kind of blanked out there for a second, but
from time to time as well. It's okay.
So much going on in my brain and everything just stops at 1 second. I'm like, what? The look ahead brought to you by 26 Shirts, 26shirts.com, at 26 Shirts on Twitter and Instagram, also facebook.com/26 Shirts. Right now, available for another day, 10 hours and roughly 36 minutes. As I say this, it's available exclusively online through August 11th. So I guess that would be today, but it says another day, whatever. Volume 6, shirt 20, waiting for the season. At $8 from every shirt sold will be donated to the Buffalo Prenatal and Perinatal Network Incorporated. It's a nice little, it says it's not affiliated with Peanuts, but it's a nice little parody of Peanuts. It's a great looking shirt. Check out 26shirts.com for that and any other shirts that they may have. And we always appreciate them supporting the podcast, and Dell supporting the podcast as well. Looking ahead to the upcoming events this week, the Buffalo Bills head to Spartanburg, South Carolina for joint practices with the Carolina Panthers before a head-to-head matchup on Friday night at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. We're looking forward to that one as well. But the important part of the podcast now, Nate, we've got a couple questions for you. We reached out on Twitter, and a couple people had some questions for you, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say. We've got, first off, Richard says, my Twitter handle is @LordPagula. My question is not necessarily a Bill-specific question, but with the new pass interference review being implemented, would it be fair to say that the smaller, shifty receivers will take over the NFL as they lack the need to, quote, push off or cause much of any contact downfield? I see this benefiting the Bills as they have essentially moved that way with their wide receivers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's totally spot on, right? Like, because between John Brown and Cole Beasley, you have two of the best guys in the league at the line of scrimmage. Devontae Adams sticks out to me as like one of the best. They're not quite at that level, but they're close. And in terms of what they can do with their feet rather than their hands, especially Cole Beasley. So yeah, totally. That and the Bills definitely have a heads up there.
Also, another question here from Zach, whose Twitter handle is I believe you would say @Cummer3000, Kummer. Yeah. That's a not safe for work Twitter handle, but whatever. My question for Nate is this: what makes an elite little loop football player?
That's a really good question, and I've got I could talk all euthanasia. I could talk all day. Little League football, the most important thing to be successful in Little League football is definitely having a wicked pissa of a throwing arm. You got to have that wicked pissa to throw that little tiny football down the field 50, 60 yards. And once you do that, then you're a great Little League football player. Got to have the wicked pissa.
Got to get that laser rocket arm.
That laser rocket arm, wicked pissa.
Now, I've got a question for you before we wrap the podcast up. I want to know, because I'm going to get you on this, prediction for the Bills this season. Where do you see them ending up record-wise, or maybe even if you don't want to throw an exact record, kind of a ballpark, where the Bills finish this season when everything's said and done?
Man, you're actually the first person that's asked me to put this on record.
Beautiful.
And it's kind of it's a little hot take-ish, and I'm not sure that I want to. I don't know. This seems like an inappropriate place to drop it. Like I feel like I don't want to get your mentions up in a.
I don't care.
Okay.
I just you know what I do. You know what I do? I just remove the Twitter app from my phone for a couple days, then I go back.
I truly, honestly, just from their schedule, I totally think they could go 11-5, and it not be that. But here's the thing. Right, like a lot of things have to go right. I think after the first game, they have to beat the Jets for that 11-win schedule to work. They have to win. They have to go 3-0 to start, and you've got to take 2 from the Jets, 2 from the Dolphins, and you probably have to split one of those Patriots games. But I think if you're an average to good football team in one of those games, maybe at home, you could beat the Patriots. I don't know. It just they just have kind of a great schedule setting up. Now, the end of the season is going to be a big thing for them. Like, can they go into that end of the season block 8-3? And you could totally find 8 wins in those first 11 games, 11, 12 weeks. So I don't know. It's a little hot takey, but I think more likely they'd end up 10-6. But if they win both Jets games, 11 games isn't as crazy as I would have thought, like, I don't know, a couple months ago. But the AFC is really tough, man. 11 wins, actually, you might need 11 wins to get in the playoffs in the AFC. So that's the thing. So if they're a playoff team that people say that they might be, you might need 11 wins to do it. So I don't know. It's crazy. crazy. I never really thought myself to say it, but I mean, a lot of those 11 wins are going to come down to, can the defense be top 2, and can Josh Allen just be like, I don't know,
like
Matt
the 15th,
Stafford,
like
or
the
a little less
15th
than
best
Matt
quarterback.
Stafford.
Yeah.
Right.
So looking at the schedule, I mean, for me, I've spent enough time where I go on those, I'm at work and I've got, 15, 20 minutes, and I take the whole schedule and I kind of put it together, and I, predict all the games. And I agree with you. It's going to be very difficult to make the playoffs in the AFC this season. There are a lot of very talented, deep teams. But with that being said, there is kind of a roadmap for the Buffalo Bills. They would have to beat the Jets, have to beat the Giants, have to beat the Bengals, have to beat the Titans. My thought is, if the Bills go into the bye week at, what would it be? It would be 4-1, coming out facing the Dolphins to potentially be 5-1. I mean,
right.
It's. I know we sound kind of, like you said, we sound kind of hot takey. We sound kind of fanboyish. I get that. I know someone will probably tell me that, but if you're thinking logically here, like if your end goal is, or your end game going in is, okay, how can the Bills make the playoffs? Because they could go out and win 5 games, but guess what? If they do that, a lot of bad stuff is going to have to happen.
Yeah,
it's more likely than not they'll at least win 8 games, at least win 8 or 9 games. I mean, my logical thought would be, they at least go 9-7 and miss the playoffs, because as we mentioned, there's the teams in the AFC that are bad are very bad. The teams that are in the AFC that are good are very good, and Buffalo kind of falls in between. But again, you have to rack up wins against the Jets, Giants, Bengals, Titans, Dolphins, Washington, Miami. I mean, if Denver's going to be good,
they'll stink. Yeah, I mean, Denver's going to be middle of the road. You just have to beat that defense.
Exactly.
Is that in Denver? Is that in Denver or in Buffalo?
That's in Buffalo.
Oh, okay.
But looking at the second half of the schedule after week 8, you've got the Eagles, the Browns, Broncos, Cowboys, Ravens, Steelers, Patriots. I mean, that's a tough stretch. Tough
stretch at the end of the year. But that's, if you can lose 4 out of 5 if you put 7 or 8 wins in that early stretch. You have to, and then you beat the Jets and you beat the Dolphins, and you feel good about yourself, and you go into, hopefully at 10, you could see it pretty easily at to 10 if they just have some of those games go their way early. That's going to be a big thing. How they look after week 12 is probably going to be how they end up getting in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And if they can rack up wins against the AFC and also in the division as well, just in case if the Jets are good and they need a tiebreaker, but more or less important to win a lot of games, obviously, but also important to win a lot of games in the AFC or against AFC opponents. So that way, if you need a tiebreaker to go your way, it can go your way. So yes, we may sound a little hot take-ish, and I appreciate you dropping that here on a podcast, but, if they're going to be as good as we expect them to be, and Sean McDermott's not going to be terminated and shot into the moon, they probably need to make a march towards 9-7, 10-6, and then either barely make it in the playoffs or be the hard luck losers that miss out by they lost to Team X on a last second field goal, and that was the reason they missed the playoffs.
Yeah. They just need that. That's my whole thing. And if you look at the early part of the schedule, as long as you can take care of your business and beat teams that we should be able to beat, that makes a big difference in my opinion. It's if you're going to be that team, there's going to be games that you have to, that Eagles game, you have to be in, that Browns game. Those. My whole thing is, if they could avoid that McDermott stretch where it's been the last 2 years in McDermott, where they go like 4 games, their defense gives up 300 yards rushing and like some crazy shit happens. If they could avoid that stretch, then that should be where they should be.
Absolutely. Well, hey, we'll look forward to it. Again, I didn't even mention congratulations on your new gig, and same to Joe. Thanks, if Joe's listening, and we appreciate you making your Better Live Than Dead Trust the podcast debut. We look forward to having you back.
Yeah, man, I'm all about it. Especially during the season, I'm all about doing podcasts because my girlfriend loves when I talk football. So
it's perfect then, because hey, look at it, it's a football podcast. And then next time we can get together, we can get some delicious buffalo pizza, have a couple beers, and have a good time.
Oh yeah, man, sounds good to me.
But again, everybody, that's Nate Geary at Nate Geary WGR on Twitter. Make sure you follow him. Again, I'm Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD. You can always hear the Trust the Podcast and all other Better Live Than Dead podcasts on betterlivethandead.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube. Wherever you get a podcast, you can get this podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. And as always, trust the podcast and go Bills.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Do you like sports, interactive polls, friendly banter from two guys that probably shouldn't even be on the microphone doing this stuff anyways? Well, if you do, then you're in luck. Us two knuckleheads, Brandon and myself, comprise the Listen In Podcast. That's right, Listen In, the podcast. We're talking sports, we're talking news, we're talking topical things, we're talking all sorts of things, my babies. And you are all invited to listen in right here on the Gear Radio Network.